we are going to talk about communication and the cadence around communication. I love the title of this conference. This might be my favorite title for a conference, The Art of a Team. I want to write this book because my career and the reason I'm standing up here right now is I've tried to merge two different things. There's a whole engineering world, and there's this people stuff that we're going to talk a lot about for the next 40 minutes, and trying to figure out how to merge the two. And here's the deal. Managing teams, leading teams is an art. And we as engineers would like to make it math, but we can't actually do that. So this is a great concept, art of the team, or the art of collaboration, because that's what I'm going to talk about. A little bit of my background. I am the director of engineering at a company in Palo Alto called Palantir. Before that, I spent 8.5 years working at a little company in Cupertino, where I ran the Mac OS X team. It is really warm up here, by the way. If I pass out, I was told to pass out backwards. I ran Mac OS X team, and then I ran the online store, engineering for that. But the reason I'm standing up here right now talking to you is this guy named Rands. Rands is this character that I've created. On Twitter, he kind of sounds like a fortune cookie. And again, what he's done, what I've been writing about, is trying to figure out how to merge these two worlds of engineering and all this people stuff. How are we going to actually kind of figure this thing out? I'm kind of a nerd whisperer, I think, is kind of how I think of myself. So we're going to start with, when we're kind of thinking about collaboration, communication, with a test. Now, what I want you guys to go do is you're going to keep track. You're going to keep score. You're not going to share these numbers with anyone. This is just for you. And what I want to do here is I want you to think about, what I'm trying to do is warm you up and think about all the ways that communication is happening within a team. But before I do that, how many of you are engineers? Awesome. All right, marketing people in the back row. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Project managers. Excellent. HR, did I say that already? HR not here? Excellent. PR, are you here? PR in the front row, chilling. Okay, so we got a mix. All right, so when we talk about communication, this is a test. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to keep points. There's about 10 or 11 of these points. Okay? Keep track. Here we go. A little warm, no falling asleep. First question. Do you have a regular one-on-one? The answer is yes. You give yourself a point. Don't say it out loud. Regular one-on-one with your lead, boss, or manager. I've been using the word lead recently because would you rather be managed? Would you rather be led? Right? And I think lead is a much more honest word of what we're talking about here. So, do you have a regular one-on-one with your lead? If you do, give yourself a point. Do you have a team or staff meeting where you get together and where you talk about whatever you do, product, company, whatever it is? Regular meeting, you get together and you chat. If you do, you give yourself a point. Do you have status reports? So every week, this is what I did, this is what I'm going to do next week, and this is what I'm blocked. If you do this, you take a point away. All right? And we'll go there in a second. Are you comfortable saying no to your lead? No, I can't do that. Do you have the trust and the respect of your lead that you can actually have a honest conversation and say, no, I can't do that? If you can, give yourself a point. Can you explain the strategy of your company to a stranger? This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's important. Can you do that? Can you do the same thing with the state of your business? We are healthy. Here is why. This is how much money we've made. This is how much money we haven't made. This is the products that we've shipped. Each of these are a point. Does the guy or gal in charge regularly stand up in front of everyone and tell you what he or she is thinking? Keynote, all hands, whatever you want to call it. You get up there and you understand this is the vision. This is how we're following it. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing. Here's our scorecard. That's a point. There's another point is, are you buying it? Is it bullshit? Are you being spun? Do you feel it? Another point, if you're buying it. Do you know what you want to be when you grow up? What is the next thing you're going to do? I don't care if you're 10 or if you're 100. What is the next thing that you're going to actually go and do? That's a point. It's an important point. Another important point is, does your lead actually share this vision? Do you have time to be strategic? How many of you are busy? Show of hands. Who can consider themselves busy? Really? Only half of you are busy? What are the other guys doing? Of course you're raising your hands. You're busy. You've got things to do. You've got tactics going on. My question to you is, on a weekly basis, do you have time where you're actually being strategic? I'm not talking about getting through to-dos. I'm talking about stepping back, looking at the whole game board and going like, holy crap, what are we doing here? Do you have time on a regular basis to be strategic? Last point. Are you, whether you're a lead or not, are you actively killing the grapevine? Everyone knows what the grapevine is. It's this sort of weird communication, connective tissue that's kind of happening, going through groups. My question to you is, are you adding to it? Are you making a more honest thing? Or are you trying to kill it and get rid of it? Another point. This is directional data. And I just want you to think about all the ways that communication is actually happening in your team. There's no, like, 11 is a great thing, but here's my basic analysis. If you're 10 or above, 11 I think is the max you can get. That's pretty sweet. Cool. You're probably somewhere in this. How many below 7? I told you I wasn't going to do that. Below 7? Okay. So this is a majority of you are actually in this range, which is good. My point is, I don't know which one you didn't give yourself a point on, but anything that's missing there, and it totally varies depending on the point, there's something hinky about the communication in your team, your company. And if you're here, those 12 people that raised your hands, yeah, you probably got a lot of things going on. Now, so again, this is about communication, and I'm an engineer, so I'm going to talk like an engineer here. There's this curse here, and it relates to communication that we have. And the curse is the fact that, well, let me step back. What do the following 3 companies have in common? Dropbox, Quora, Facebook. I just took this picture this morning, so I'm checking to see if there's anything embarrassing. Nope, we're looking good. All right. Anyway, what's unique about these companies? Anyone? Pop quiz? I'll tell you. CEO of these companies are all engineers. They are engineers that I don't know if they're still coding, but you're talking about Adam D'Angelo at Quora, you're talking about Zuckerberg, or you're talking about, what was the third one, Dropbox? Drew Houston. These are engineers, and they're running the show. This is great. As an engineer, what's happening, this has changed in the last 5, 10 years. Before, I used to work at Netscape a bazillion years ago. It started out with Jim Clark, and he was kind of a nerd and weird professor. And then Jim Barksdale showed up. It was the suits showed up, right? And this is changing. We're seeing more and more leadership, especially in the Silicon Valley and in tech, in the engineers. This is kind of cool, but there's some challenges here as well. There's some things that engineers don't do well. What the hell does this have to do with Tron Legacy? How many of you have seen Tron Legacy? I'm guessing it's probably a good demographic. Okay, half of you. Well, so the thing about Tron Legacy is interesting to me is, first off, this movie is the world's best screensaver with a really excellent soundtrack. This movie is interesting to me. I won't tell you the whole story here, but it's interesting about it is that the fundamentals of the spirit of the whole story is this guy, Flynn, he's like zapping himself into cyberspace, and he wants to do something very interesting. His core thing that he wants to do is he believes in the perfect system. What the hell does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. Engineers believe that the world is a measurable place. It comes from a really kind of tight relationship with the computers. We believe that it's measurable, that there's a flow chart that guides it. And this can make us really, really bad communicators. But let me tell you the rules about how we want to build this perfect system. Engineers strive to reduce chaos because it's inefficient. Engineers have phenomenal bullshit detection. I love this. How many of you have been in that all hands where that guy in the front row just keeps on asking questions of the CEO? He's like, yeah, what do you mean by this? And there's like 300 of us there. And he keeps on asking questions. You're like, oh my God, don't you know there's 300 people here? Because he's calling bullshit on them, right? He doesn't understand something. He doesn't care that everyone else is fine and they're just taking it. We have phenomenal bullshit detection because we find facts, because we're data-driven. We want to understand how it works. We're willing to take the time to chase. We're willing to take the time to go deep in order to understand something and to solve a problem completely. How many of you have woke up Saturday morning and you're sitting at your computer and something doesn't just feel right? It's just loading slow. And suddenly it's 3 hours later and you've taught yourself regex and you've been parsing log files just to figure out this one thing that's like, why is Spotlight slowing my system down? It's just pissing me off, right? That's an engineer at work. Engineers believe there are always rules that will predict what is going to come next. Finite state machines. There's this flow chart that you can discover that's going to make it all very clear to you. They're willing to go to insane lengths to have marginal efficiency improvements. How many of you have sat and worked on shell scripts all morning just to do one simple thing, just something that's just bugging you? We have a powerful relevancy engine at our disposal. What is a relevancy engine? I will tell you. This is a relevancy engine. I get Saturday morning, my wife walks in, and she's like, "Hey, Michael." I'm like, "Hey, honey, how's it going?" She says, "Hey, I saw your parents down at the restaurant. At the bakery, and that Italian restaurant closed, and that's really interesting to me because we really like that place, and after that I went to this thing, and this is what I heard." I said, "Hi, honey." She said, "Hi, I saw your parents, blah, 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 blah." And then she stops, and I hear the pause, blah, 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 stop, and I say, "Cool." And she's mad at me because I didn't hear anything she just said, because I made this judgment call, because I'm really good at, does this matter or not? And it's rude, of course it's rude, but this is what engineers do. We're always looking for, where's the signal and where is the noise? And we find none of this, all of this laborious, weird stuff, to be work. Sounds kind of interesting, sounds kind of weird. The thing that's standing between a lot of engineers and actually getting stuff done is that the world is just full of these people and their messiness and their stuff, and they're unpredictable, and it's just driving us up the wall. Which I think leads to a lot of tension, friction in a team. Act 2, an event of significance. I need a little water. So the curse here is that a lot of engineers are promoted, and they do well, and they get to a branch where they're going to be one of two persons. They're either going to be, I'm going to go be an architect, or I'm going to go be a lead, right? They say, well, I can either, because I'm going to be architect, I can have a little more influence, but I want to keep coding. I'm going to go be a lead, where I'm going to maybe get the perception I'm making more money, or I'm going to have more influence. And they say, okay, I'm going to be the lead. Now, an interesting thing happens here. How do they get to this promotion state? They did great work as an engineer, and suddenly they become a lead, and everything that made them great as a coder is suddenly not relevant anymore because they move over to the other side of the brain. This is the curse. We have all of these managers, leaders, CEO types that are not really good. There's people that are good, that are not really good people person. This is the curse of the Silicon Valley. The first thing that I did when I went to the most recent company I'm working at is, as Palantir, as I said, they said, listen, we've got all these new folks. They're all engineers. Palantir's about 75% engineers. And we want you to figure out how to build a lead indoc. A lead indoc, it's just basically training. It's like, how are we going to take someone, give them enough training to actually be a better leader? And I thought about this. I'm like, okay, we can read this book, we can do this thing. But I'm like, oh, this is a great thing. I'm going to build this thing called mock mystery disasters. What a mock mystery disaster is, how many of you are leads again, manager types? Let's see here. Okay, good. What a mock mystery, as a lead, as a manager, there's about 7 things that are just total disasters that are going to happen to you. And this is your privilege as a lead to have them happen to you. Having to fire someone, having someone yell at each other, they're awful, having to put someone on a performance plan, having to give someone really hard feedback, right? This is your job as a lead. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build mock mystery disasters where these leads are going to get a little script and say, hey, Sally, you're going to go talk. You have a Bob scheduled a meeting from QA with you to go in, and you don't know what it's about, and it's just a regular meeting. And he walks in, and Bob, who's a Palantir employee, goes and says, this scene happens, and this disaster occurs, right? And they're awesome because you get to experience some of the worst parts of leadership in sort of a role-playing scenario. And then we have this post-game, and we talk about it, and they go, oh my God, that was awful, and this sort of thing. The thing about the mock mystery disasters is people like them. I am building up a callus for these guys and gals who are becoming leads, but we're not solving the actual problem. I'm letting them solve the disaster, but the question is, why did the disaster occur in the first place? Where does a disaster begin with people? Phil is yelling at Fez in a public environment. It's like people are uncomfortable. We need to let Frank go. He's been on a performance plan. He's not doing it. I got to let him go. Marcel, our best engineer, quit. We're screwed. This guy's the only guy who can do X, Y, and Z. These are awful. These are like, oh my God, I have to figure out what I'm going to do here. But my question to you is, where did it start? What was a rainy day doesn't start out rainy. You kind of walk outside and you're like, smells like rain. There's signs. There's little things that you notice. And a lot of these disasters start with little bits of friction. They start with little things that turn into these huge disasters. A butterfly flaps its wings in Japan and suddenly it's raining in San Jose, right? But here's the thing. This is how an engineer would like it to be. We have a person, X. We have a situation, Y, which reveals a predictable outcome. This is how we'd love it to be. This would be great if the world was like this. Obviously, the world is not at all like this whatsoever, because you are all beautiful snowflakes. You're all unique. You're all having a certain kind of day in this warm room. You have something that's unique about you. And today, the unique thing is this, and tomorrow it's going to be this other thing. Everyone is unique. The situations are infinite. There's always something about them that is unique. So you've got this total snowflake situation. You've got this infinite list of situations, and you get a lot of this. I spend a lot of my time going like, Bob, you're this kind of guy. It's this situation, and you just didn't do at all what I predicted was going to happen. And it's actually worse than this, right? Because there's just all of these flipping snowflakes out there, and they're everywhere, and they're unique, and they're beautiful, and they kind of look like they're the same, but they're really just totally, completely different. And it's actually worse. I want you guys to do something. They normally, at the beginning of talks, tell you to, please turn off your cell phones. I want you to take your cell phones out. I want you to turn the volume all the way up. If you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And I want you to text someone that's going to text you back, right? Go, so, hey, this guy in the crazy shirt up in front told me to text you, right? All the way up, text someone, leave your phone out. We'll see if it actually echoes. It's better in kind of a enclosed space, okay? We doing it? Some people are doing it? We'll see what happens here. Usually when it's a smaller space, it's just like bing, bong, bing. The point is this. The point I want to make to you is this. What's really, in addition to all of this chaos of people, in addition to all of these different situations, you have an incredible amount of noise. You have a huge, it's not beeping yet. It's too big of a room. They're echoing. It's incredibly noisy. You've got all of these things you have to do, and it's really easy with all this noise and stuff going on. Now I'm wondering what you guys are texting, like, this freaky guy is telling me to text. Or now you're going to get lost in like a big conversation and stop listening. So sad. Anyway, it's really noisy. There's all this other stuff, so it's really easy to ignore the little friction points that are actually going to turn into disasters. The world is a noisy place. And the thing is, some of that noise is actually signal. Some of those little beeps and bongs that aren't occurring right now because it's too big of a room are actually something that are really, really important. And you're like, how do I actually go and tell? What is the friction? What is the signal? What is the noise? I will tell you. But before I go there, I want to just basically set the stage here. If you're a lead, people go crazy. There's things that are going to drive people nuts. And it's not just how much they're getting paid or whether they have a window or not or what their title is. Think about it. Think about the last time someone did something and they just completely threw you off your game. And you're like, oh my God, I'm irrational about this, right? These sorts of situations, with people especially, they get into your bones and they start to poison it. And the next time you see that person who pissed you off, you're like, you're not rational anymore. You're like, I don't actually like you anymore. Because you said that thing that you don't even know you did. And this is the thing. Now, the thing is, if I'm your lead, it's my job to make sure that you're not poisoned, that you're not going crazy. And the question is, how do we do that? The root of misunderstanding, to me, is a lack of context. It's like I don't actually know what's going on in a situation. Disasters involving people start quietly in ways you would never expect, and they start simply. Crap communication, to me, is at the root of a lot of professional misery. A lot of times things have exploded around you. I would argue that something happened in the communication perhaps years ago that set the stage for that case. Phil is yelling at Fez because a year ago, Fez pulled high status on Phil and said, blah, blah, blah. And Phil said, this dude's talking down to me, and I don't like him. Fez didn't even know he was doing it. Didn't even know he was doing it. And Phil got rocked, and it got into his bones, and he got poisoned. The reason that you're letting Frank go is because you put him on a project a year ago that he was never going to succeed at. He does not have the skill nor the will to pull it off. And nobody asked, and he failed. So you put him on a plan long after he gave up. And of course he didn't succeed. A year ago you did this. These are obviously fake scenarios, but I just want you to remember how communication is always happening. Marcel quit because you put him on performance 6 months ago, working on performance. He's great at it, but he hates it. And again, no one asked. Now he's quitting. And there's no diving save that's going to keep the guy because he believed 6 months ago that you did him wrong, and no one asked and followed up. We have to find a cadence in our communication in a team. I'm going to give you a predictable communication framework. Predictable because, contrary to everything I just said, you need to build some confidence, that you're actually going to be able to predict some of these bizarre situations. You're actually going to be able to find the friction before it turns into poison that turns into a disaster. Communication because as a lead, but as really anybody in the company, your job is to communicate well, right? It leads to all sorts of other goodness like better decisions, efficiency, improved morale. And I'm giving you a framework because I'm a nerd and I have to put things into a framework to understand actually how they work. This is not a be-all, end-all. In fact, this advice is really, really, really obvious. It's really obvious. Everything I'm going to put on this next slide you probably heard before. And I hammer on it a little bit because I think it's super important. One-on-ones, staff meetings, and the hallway. These are really obvious things. There's nothing new up here. But let's talk about them a little bit. What do I expect out of each of these things? We'll talk to them real quick. 15 minutes late. Got to speed up. So one-on-ones. A one-on-one, of course. How many of you have one-on-ones with your folks? That's pretty damn good. How many of you don't have them because you're solo? One-man shop, one-person shop. A lot of you don't have one-on-ones. One-on-one is you, the snowflake, and you, the other snowflake, sitting down and you're talking. Every week, no matter what, 30 minutes at least. There's two team models, basically, in this valley. If one is the Apple model, which is actually the HP model, and then there's the Google model. The Apple model is 7 plus or minus 3 is like a good team size, right? Same thing at HP. The Google model, some teams, is kind of a clusterfuck because they have teams which are, Google guys, if you're here, I'm sorry, but they have teams where it's like one lead with like 70 direct reports. That, I would argue that that person is not leading those 70 people. He or she does not have the time to actually lead those folks. One of the biggest problems people have when they see these slides is like, hey, Lop, I've got 30 people that I'm leading. So you're telling me to do 30 minutes, I'm doing the math, da-da-da-da. You're not leading those people. Your job is not. And this is my religion that the teams are small, but I think that it's a responsibility of the lead, the manager, to care and feed for his or her people. So how do we go into this? You go into a one-on-one, if you've never done one before, the person is going to be sitting there, and they're going to want to give you status. And we'll talk about status in a little bit. They say, hey, I closed these 3 bugs, and this thing's going on, da-da-da-da. This is not the point. The point of a one-on-one for me, when I talk with any one of you, is I assume I go in with the state of mind that you have something to teach me. I don't know what that is. And it may be something small, maybe something big. What do you think of Mary? Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know you hated her. That's news I can use, right? Let's go talk to design this feature. What do you think of our strategy? I'm sitting there trying to figure out, I want to learn one thing. Because a one-on-one is about building trust and respect between the lead and their team. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of work. But when you get there, some amazing things happen. But again, the thing they're going to want to do is start with status. They're not comfortable like having a huge, big strategic discussion because there's a deadline and we got to get stuff out. So what I do for one-on-ones is I walk in with 3 prepared points. There are 3 things about you that I want to talk about. If I don't have that, all right. Now, I'm not a big fan of annual reviews. That's a whole other topic of conversation. We turn it into a performance review. We talked about that when you grow up, you want to be a writer. And where's our software engineering? There's not a lot of need, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we are exercising that muscle. Because I don't want you to get bored, because bored people quit. Okay, not a performance review. How about my current disaster? Shit's always blowing up. It's always blowing up. There's always disasters going on, which maybe means I'm a bad leader, but there's something there we can talk about. There's something big, meaty. It's like, hey, Marcel's quitting. What do you think of that? All right, let's go through that. Let's find something that you can teach me. I play this game on Twitter. When you say blah, I hear this. A one-on-one is about building trust. It's about building respect. And one of the things people do when they don't understand the priority of a one-on-one is they move it. They say, God, I really want to meet with Bob, but there's just so many other things going on. And this is what they hear. When you say, I'm too busy for that, what they're hearing is, that's not important to me. That's what they hear when the one-on-one was scheduled. And I've rescheduled a lot of one-on-ones. But that's what they're hearing. And believe it or not, this is poison. What you're saying is, what they're hearing, you do it you get 1 or 2 and you're okay. You do it 3 times in a row. What they're hearing is, getting in their head is like, he or she does not value me. Is that where you want to work? Nope. If there's nobody there on the team, your job is exactly nothing, right? You have nothing to do if your team isn't there. So my job, my religion is, let's make the people awesome. Let's take the time to actually understand what's important to them. An expected yield out of a one-on-one to me is that you're filling the time. I do 45 minutes with my folks because it's just slightly less than an hour, so I either get that extra time or we have another 50 minutes when it goes really well. But I like to see it's filling the time, that we're having conversations of significance, that we're talking about something, right? Whatever that is, and it takes time, but they get better and it gets easier. The other thing is, what I think you do when you get into a good one-on-one situation is you have an early warning system. When you tell me that you're bored with this thing, and we're just shooting the shit, right? You just say, I'm kind of bored with this thing. All sorts of flags go off in my head because I know that what happens is boredom turns into dissatisfaction, which turns into this larger thing, and suddenly you're like, why are they happening on this product that I'm bored on? And suddenly you're getting yourself into this poison state of like, oh my God, and you want to quit and you want to leave. One-on-ones are a great source once you get to a good cadence of early warnings about possible friction. Your job is to listen, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Staff meeting. Staff meeting is you and all the snowflakes sitting at the table, having a lovely conversation. These are going to look very familiar. Every week on Monday, no matter what, 60 minutes, 90 minutes is better. The best meeting at Apple happens on Monday. Steve, rest in peace, would get all the execs together and they'd go over the entire state of the business. They'd go look at everything. Dashboard that describes everything that's going on. So it is status, right? They go over status, and what it's doing, and it's just the first part of the meeting, what they're doing, it's setting the tone for the week, because business has a cadence, right? There's something that's going on every week, and that's what they do. Now, the other thing they do is they allow themselves to have a big, fat conversation, whether it's drilling on something that's red in the status or something else. Again, to me, the staff meeting is sacred time. It's sacred because it's time to debate the strategy of the company. And how often do you do that? How often do you do that and sit back and go like, why are we doing this, right? Challenging things that you maybe are just obvious, right? That's what I like to see out of a staff meeting. There's 3 things that sort of flip-flop on in my career. Number 1 is do remote employees work? Number 2 is our status report. Well, number 2 is actually our status reports useful? And number 3 is should engineers who become leads keep coding? I'm going to answer those out of order. If you're a lead and you're an engineer, you keep coding. That muscle is important to keep working on. Does remote work? The answer is it doesn't matter. It has to figure out how to work because we're becoming more and more of a distributed planet. It just has to work out. I'm a face-to-face guy, but we have to figure that one out, and that's a whole other conversation. Number 3 is, are status reports valuable? And the answer is absolutely, totally not. Status reports are the last resort of a leader who lacks creativity. We as engineers generate a huge amount of status. Bug reports, all the Atlassian tools, there's a ton of stuff there. Go write a tool to go dig up that sort of stuff. Status, again, is important, conveying that information, but you want to convey it face-to-face, one-to-one. In a staff meeting, we can debate it, we can understand it, right? Status reports, again, I wondered if it was a way to actually get a better connective tissue in a company. It's not. It's someone who doesn't want to take the time to build a good communication culture. Status report's bad. The expected yield for me out of a staff meeting is that we're aligned. This is just management buzzword. I don't hear it, but it's like to me as an engineer, it's like I know that you're working on the front end, I know that you're working on the back end, Docs has everything that they need, and we're aligned, and that's efficient, right? And that's what we're doing there. Or we're aligned with the strategy of the company, or we're aligned in an agreement that the strategy is totally screwed up, and we have to go figure it out. That's what you're doing when you come out of a staff meeting. A staff meeting for me, it starts out 60 minutes. People are like, listen, an hour, blah, blah, blah. You run this well, they go long. My staff meetings are 90 minutes, and we fill it every single time. We have things that we're debating. They're fun. They're hard. We call people out on their bullshit. Action items come out of that. But again, the ultimate thing you're doing here as a lead in this meeting is you're listening. The last one, more snowflakes, is the hardest one to actually measure. It's the hallway. And you probably know what this is. The hallway is every week, randomly throughout the building, you are going to wander, and you're going to put it on your calendar. You're going to get up out of your desk, and with no agenda whatsoever, other than to wander around, you're going to go wander around. For me, there's this kitchen on the other side of Palantir that has really good cheese. So when I'm feeling cheese deficient and I have some time, I walk over and I find things. Now, you're wondering, how do you actually make that an efficient wander? I really just want the cheese, actually. But the thing is about all of these things, when I'm talking about one-on-ones, when I'm talking about staff meetings, when I'm talking about this hallway stumble, is you're playing the odds. I'm trying to improve the odds that you're going to stumble on something that's really important. And the hallway for me is just me practicing random acts of communication. Hey, Mary, what do you think about that? And you go, well, I think this is okay, now done. Hey, what do you think about that feature? Does the customer love it? No, the customer fucking hates it. And you're like, well, that's news I can use. Oh my God, I got to actually do this. What I'm doing there is I'm kind of testing what my view of the company is, or the team, or the product. The expected yield out of a really good sort of hallway stumble routine is zeitgeist. Zeitgeist, this is the will of the people. A good leader has a good sense of how his or her team, product, company, division, they have a good sense of it. But they also test it constantly because the world is full of snowflakes and things are constantly changing. You have to go out there and you have to test ideas and you have to see what's going on because, again, you're looking for that little thing that's going to just totally take you off the edge. Your job is to listen. I've said this 3 times now. What do I mean by this? Listening involves your entire body. It's a skill. It's not just sitting there and cool. That's why my wife hates me. You actually have to sit there and you have to create a space between you and the person you're talking to where actually things are going to happen. When I start one-on-ones for the people, yes, I can talk, I can ramble, I have my hands going, but I will sit there and wait 30 seconds to a minute to let them go say the next thing. In my head, once I've talked enough and it's time for them to say something, I'll just sit there. And you know the thing about this thing is it's uncomfortable. First off, it only happens a couple of times. They know that this is their turn to talk because I've gotten through whatever I want to say, is they say something because they're like, hey, yeah, I have a lot of fucking bugs. Like, yes, you do. Let's talk about that, right? Let's go do it. That's status, but you get the idea, right? It involves being a good listener. It takes practice, and it's different for each person that you're going to go and actually talk with. There are more of them than you if you're a lead, and you got to remember that. That is our predictable communication framework. That's it? Yeah, those are the things you have to go and do. You have to do these on a regular basis. Here's the thing. Why would you want to go do these things? Well, your first answer is, well, I would like to avoid these situations. I would like to avoid these disasters. But here's the thing about this sort of communication structure that I'm talking about. You know what disasters sound like. You know what they feel like. They're actually kind of fun because you're alive, because the sky is falling on you, right? And you're like, well, I got to figure this out. You get inventive and you do this sort of thing. But there was a disaster, and there's some reason that it showed up in the first place. I don't know what it is. The thing about these things and why they're hard to quantify and why they're hard to measure and why engineers don't really necessarily get them is this is your reward for doing this. It's silence. The disaster didn't occur. Now, how do I actually go and say, how do I actually go and measure that and say, like, because I'm having one-on-ones, my team is happier. Because staff is here, we have a staff meeting that we're more productive. I can't. I don't actually know. I know that my team is happier. I know that morale is better. Maybe attrition is lower. But this is the thing with these things, is that this is what you get. Each time you go and find a piece of friction and you do something with it, you get a little bit more of this. Success is silent. And this is hard. Engineers do not do this work instinctively because we're not good with all these messy snowflakes. It takes a disaster to get attention, but a disaster is a sign of some failure earlier on. And I've got a minute and a half. We are wired for stimulus, which is why disasters are great. Let's not have disasters. Let's focus our stimulus on something else. This is the thing. There's going to be a lot of what the fuck with people. You're going to have this all the time. You just got to deal with it. You got to understand that there's a chaos to it. And you can apply a structure to it, but this is going to always be the case. The same person in the exact same scenario is going to change the behavior. It's totally annoying. But the thing is, teams of people experience success and failure at scale, right? Little things scale up and turn into huge disasters. And what you want to do as a great leader is you actually want to get ahead of it. Your job is to listen. Every week, no matter what. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.